Hey everybody, welcome to Senator Right. Well, we've certainly been told over the past few months how the Trump administration has screwed up their response to the COVID pandemic. But we haven't really been told anything about Congress and their role in the response to the COVID pandemic. And quite frankly, as fast as the news goes, it'd be pretty easy to totally gloss over and forget everything that Congress has done in order to either help or hinder our progress in fighting this epidemic. There's a lot to this. I even had to bust out my notes today. I can't do it from memory. So look, let's get started. First thing is there was an act that was signed into law right after 9/11. It's called the Pandemic and All Hazards Prep Act. Now, in the beginning, this act, when it was signed into law, was funded fully because it helped prepare us for emergencies just like that happened in 9/11, just like this COVID emergency. But it's been consistently underfunded. In fact, the people who run that particular law, the administrators, they were given half of the money that they believed they needed to keep those laws running as intended when they were originally signed into law. The next area is the Strategic National Stockpile. Funding for that stockpile has been dramatically reduced every year. In fact, this year in 2019, as they were working toward the 2020 budget, the administrators of the stockpile said they needed $1 billion to replace drugs that were out of, they'd reached their expiration. There were machines that needed maintenance. And I'll tell you what, they didn't get anywhere near the amount of money they needed. In fact, they got less than half of what they needed. So just going into this thing, the lessons that we had learned before, the parts and pieces and laws that had been put into place, they weren't even funded. So that's Congress's job to fund those. And it's the administration's and the administrator's position to request funds from Congress so that they can keep the law as enacted working correctly. So let's go back and take a look, because this thing has gone really fast. It was December of 2019 when the first report from China of this virus took place. And in 21 January, that was when we actually had our very first confirmed case. So at that point, I think it was incumbent upon both the administration and the Congress to get cranking and do something about this pandemic. On 23 January, now this is 2 days later, the administration decided to hold a briefing for the full Senate on this pandemic. Everything they had learned, it would be classified, and it would be the entire Senate, 100 senators. Care to guess how many attended? 14. 14 senators attended that briefing. You know why it's believed that only 14 came? Because it was the last day for anyone to prepare their notes and their request in the impeachment hearing for the president. 14. A lot of the people felt like, maybe if you were on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats, they felt like, hey, they're just trying to distract us from the impeachment. But the fact is they weren't. And so even though there was information there for legislators to begin to take some type of action, only 14 of them attended. On 26 January, Senator Schumer calls on the feds to declare the coronavirus outbreak a public health emergency. The reason he did this was so that the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention could access $85 million that is allocated to fight infectious diseases. In response to that, the Secretary of Health and Human Services declared a public health emergency on January 31st. So that was one of the first things that people in Congress did to help get money into the hands of the administration so that they could fix something Bravo for Senator Schumer. Sometimes the administration or whoever doesn't understand the law. Well, we can give you the money, but you got to do this. And that's what took place. On 31 January, the White House banned most travel from China. I think everyone's pretty aware of that right now. There was a lot of ill effects from that. A lot of people made statements about bias and xenophobia and all the other terms that are typically used. So on 31 January, that same evening, the Democratic-controlled Congress introduced the No Ban Act. So in response to what the president did to keep people from Wuhan, China, to keep them out of our country, the first thing that Congress did was to try and get an act passed and signed into law that would limit the president's ability to issue bans on travel. I don't know, I don't get that, but it just doesn't seem like it was the right time and place or the right thing to do. Zooming forward to 13 February, 2 weeks later, here's what a couple of senators were doing. Senator Richard Burr, who was in charge of the Intelligence Committee, was busy selling his stocks. Now, just so you know, it's not against the law for members of Congress to hold stocks. It's also not against the law for them to buy and sell stocks based on what they know. It happens all the time. If you know that we're getting ready to buy 100 tanks from AMC, well, you can invest in AMC because you know we're getting ready to buy tanks. That happens all the time. But one thing you can't do is you cannot take intelligence and use that intelligence to purchase and sell stocks. It's against the law. That's what he did. And now it looks like he's going to pay the price for it. That was pretty silly. Right around the same time, Senator Kelly Loeffler from Georgia, she sold stocks valued at up to $3.1 million based on what they feel was knowledge that she learned from the Senate Health Committee. And it was right around the time that she hosted a private all-senators briefing from administration officials, including the CDC director and Dr. Fauci. And guess what she did do? She didn't just sell stocks, she bought stocks. Care to guess one of the big stocks that she bought? Citrix. For those of you who don't know, Citrix is used quite frequently for remote access into the computers. It's used for the same types of things that people have been doing, like Microsoft Teams. People use it to talk to each other through video. Pretty good move. And I can confirm that Citrix stock price did in fact go up. On the 24th of February, 2 weeks later, Trump asked for $2.5 billion to fight the coronavirus, and that was to accelerate vaccine development, support preparedness, and to procure equipment and supplies, probably from that national stockpile that was halfway depleted. So the reaction by Senator Chuck Schumer was, hey, too little, too late. No sign. The president doesn't have a plan. The president also wants to pull funding from, actually he said steal funding dedicated to fight Ebola, which is still considered an epidemic in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Hey, look, I don't really care about Congo right now. If we need the money, we need to take it. I do get the law bit, but the fact is if he needs the money, you could just knock it out and get it done. But that's not the way it went. In fact, what happened is it took 10 days for Congress to provide funding for the administration. 10 days. During that time period, on 24 February, Ms. Pelosi toured San Francisco's Chinatown, telling everybody, hey, come on down. There's no problems here. Don't be scared. Don't be xenophobic. Don't be phobic anything. Just come have a good time. And as she toured the downtown herself.
It's exciting to be here, especially at this time, to be able to be unified with our community. We want to be vigilant about what it might be on what is out there in other places, We want to be careful about how we deal with it, but we do want to say to people, come to Chinatown. Here we are. We're, again, careful, safe, and come join us.
By 3 March, there were 102 cases of COVID, but finally on 4 March, the House passed an $8.3 billion bill, which was, I'm good with that, but I believe that one of the bylines that you hear consistently on the news and from people, we let days go by without doing anything. The president let months go by. The president let weeks go by without doing anything. But here, they could have just shotgunned this money out, got him what he needed, changed the law, whatever it took, and then they could have come back and got the remaining funds. But instead, they waited 10 days before they approved the money. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't need the 8.3 billion. I'm with that. But let's give the administration what they need, and then let's tie up loose ends. The next thing that happened was the bill itself, the CARES Act, which is what I'm really trying to get to, is that they were close to closing in on it. And just before the act was going to go before the president, before it was going to be voted on and go to the president, Lindsey Graham, who's a Republican senator, and 3 other senators stood up and said, hey, listen, this is not going to work. And what were they angry about? $600 a week that they were going to give additional to people who were out of work because of the coronavirus. And they said, hey, at that rate, people are not going to want to work, because the people that are affected mostly in the jobs that were being targeted by the coronavirus for disruption, 60% of them would have made more money with the additional funds than they would have if they had worked. And he said, hey, it's not designed, that's not what it's designed to do. It's just designed to help you through a rough time. Man, I got to tell you, those Republican senators, they were lambasted on the local news, the national news, everything, and they were called everything under the sun, heartless and the whole 9 yards. Well, they backed off, and on the 27th of March, the president signed the bill. And let me tell you something, and I'm going to do a video on this later about our deficit, but people always talk about, well, we're $20 trillion, and our deficit is $20 trillion. This is crazy, right? Well, let me tell you how we get there. For this year, our budget was about $4.4 trillion to run America. Do you know how much money we were bringing in taxes? And this is after the tax cut and everything. We were bringing in the most money we've ever brought in to our coffers. You know how much that was? $3.5 trillion. So we were bringing in $3.5 trillion, but we overspent in the budget by $1 trillion. So our budget was we were $1 trillion over our budget, which means for this fiscal year, our budget deficit for this year was over $1 trillion. That gets added into the big numbers, the 20 trillion that everybody talks about. After they signed this bill, we tripled our deficit. So we tripled our deficit this year so that this bill could be signed into law and provide the funding that it does. So let's take a look quickly at what happened. So the first thing that happened is there were a lot of happy people. Like this lady, Jamie Black Lewis, she felt like she had won the lottery. She applied for one of the PPP loans, which is what you can do. She was approved for the PPP loans. She got all the people together that work for her business and told them, hey, you can come back to work. They were livid. They were so livid, this thing actually hit the national news. Why were they livid? Because they would have made less money by going back to work. So the people who had lost their jobs would rather the provider of their job go out of business so that they could get extra money every month until this thing was over, Now, I know we hear a lot of talk about uh, bad managers and bad corporations and all this. Jeez, this is bad people. I mean, this lady went out on a limb to get this loan so that everybody could come back to work and or at least keep their jobs at the same rate. They may not have been able to come back to work, but they could keep getting paid. That's all they had to do, and her business would have stayed afloat, and then once this is over, they could all go back to work. Well, I guess Lindsey Graham was right on that. One of the other things that happened was that you had these companies, some of them like Potbelly, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, Taco Cabana. Well, they all qualified for these loans. I know you've heard about this on the news, these businesses who took advantage of the law. In fact, Speaker Pelosi lambasted several places that had taken loans, saying, "Give the money back. We're calling you out." But guess what? It was written in the law. The law stated that actually, you know what? What the law stated is that you are a small business with 500 or less people. But then when you scroll down, they added a little part in there that was an exception. And that exception is that if you were a company and you had people working in different locations, then and there were less than 500 people, you still qualified for these loans. So examples, if you have Ruth Chris's Steakhouse and you had 6 locations and you had let's say 1,500 employees, as long as they were not all in one location, they were spread out and they were under 500, you were eligible for the loan. So they took the loan. Why they put that exception in there, I'm not quite sure, but it was the law that was written. And for legislators to chastise people for taking money that was written in the law, well, it's not their fault. They're just doing what you told them to do. You signed it into law. There were also other places that this law affected. So, for instance, there were schools and colleges that had significant endowments. They were able to take loans and get grants. There were airports that had very little traffic, but because of the way the law was written, they were able to receive huge sums of money, where other airports that didn't meet certain requirements as set up by law couldn't get anywhere near the amount of money. Now, I don't even know why the airports needed to get the money in the first place. The other piece is that there were loans given out to large businesses and grants, like let's say the airlines. The airlines, they receive their money through stockholders, and when times are good, they reap the benefits. The fact is when times are bad, they have to pay the price, not the American people. This bill was written, and the American people have to foot the price for, they have to pay the price for corporations so that the corporations can stay in business. This same thing happened in 2008 with companies that were bailed out. Their bailouts, bailed out by our government. Wow, it's just crazy. So there is a lot going on with this legislation. It's not just about what the administration did, but there was also legislation involved that wasn't prepared adequately. And oddly enough, right after this thing was signed, remember, we went from January to March before any legislation went out, the end of March. Within a week of that legislation being signed into law, everybody was wondering, where's my money? How come this person hasn't been helped? And oddly enough, within 2 weeks, all the PPP loan money was gone. It was gone because the bill was written incorrectly, and a lot of people got money that they shouldn't have received. Then, of course, there were complaints about, well, I can't get through to the my office so that I can get my unemployment. Well, unemployment is run by the states. The states were overwhelmed by this. This law, I don't know, man. My point is that there's more to it than what people are saying in the news, and we have to take a look at the totality of the package. It's not just the president that's doing a bad job here, it's our lawmakers. I'll be right back with the wrap up. Hey, welcome to the wrap up. I hope you made it this far, because I did do a little rambling on, and I did have to have some papers and stuff to kind of keep things in order. You know, if you don't get it right, why do one of these videos? I want to make sure that I had everything right in the timeline. But look, the most important thing here is to know that one person isn't going to get it right, one person isn't going to get it wrong. I try and mention all the time that we have to look at these things in the total package of everything. People make mistakes and people do good things. We all fail and we all succeed as a team. There's not just one place that you can say somebody had a problem and they're the reason that people died and they're the reason that we have these problems. Look, we usually get ourselves into these kind of messes real quickly. Before it happens, in the planning piece and the preparation piece, and then during the execution. So hey, right now, while they're trying to figure out what the next $3 trillion package is going to be, you pay attention and take a look at what's going on, which is what I had to do. And then you might find that either you can affect something right now, maybe, or at least you can keep track of it and find out what really happened instead of just relying on the news and the people on the news who say all kinds of things and try and get people confused and have some kind of agenda. You pay attention. Hey, if you like this video, hit the like button. If you want to subscribe for more, please subscribe. Take care.